Part 2 starts with a quote. How little remains of the man I once was, save the memory of him, but remembering is only a new form of suffering. Charles Baudelaire, La Fanfarla. So, Part 2, Delia. When I was little, I used to imagine the ways my mother would come back to me. I would be ordering a milkshake at a diner, and the woman sitting on the stool next to me would turn, and her eyes would connect like lightning. Or I'd open the door, and instead of the mailman, my mother would be standing there with her arms open. I'd go to my first driver's ed class in high school and slip into the car and find her waiting with a clipboard in the passenger seat, just as surprised as I was. In all these daydreams, death was not the absolute it is supposed to be, and we always found each other by accident. In all of these daydreams, my mother and I recognized each other without a single spoken word. It's strange to think that at some time in the past 28 years, she might have been standing in line behind me at the grocery store. We might have passed each other in a bus station or on a crowded street. We might even have talked politely on the phone. No, I'm sorry, you have the wrong number. It is strange to think that we might have crossed paths and still not have known what we were missing. You can boil your life down to a single suitcase if you desperately have to. Ask yourself what you really need, and it won't be what you imagine. You will easily toss aside unfinished work and bills and your daily calendar to make room for the pair of flannel pajamas you wear when it rains, and the stone your child gave you that is shaped like a heart, and the battered paperback you revisit every April because it was what you were reading the first time you fell in love. It turns out that what's important is not everything that you've accumulated all these years, but those few things you can carry with you. Sophie presses her face to the tiny window of the plane waiting for takeoff. It is her first flight. As far as my daughter knows, we are going on a spontaneous adventure, a vacation. I've told her that where we're headed it's warm, that Eric is already there waiting for us. Maybe my mother is too. She still hasn't called. Maybe, like Fitz said, she's afraid. Maybe her attorneys have told her not to. Eric has explained to me that just because the state of Arizona is prosecuting after all this time doesn't mean that my mother is pushing for it, or even that she's still alive. An outstanding warrant is an outstanding warrant, period. Every now and then I let myself think the darkest thought, that the reason she hasn't contacted me is because she doesn't want to. I cannot reconcile that mother with the one I've pictured for years. But then again, if my mother was as perfect as I've always imagined, why would my father have run away with me? I've never doubted his love for me, but for that to still be true, given what I know now, do I have to doubt my mother's love for me? And if I won't, then don't I have to admit to myself that my father has done something wrong? When I tell all this to Eric, he said I'd find out soon enough if my mother is still living in Arizona, that I should just stop analyzing it to death because it's only going to make me crazy. But if it were me and Sophie, and it had been years, I wouldn't listen to lawyers. I wouldn't pay attention to misgivings. I would walk halfway across the world to stand on my daughter's doorstep. I'd wait for her to answer the bell and hold her so close that nothing could come between us, not even the narrowest sliver of regret. Mommy, Sophie asks, will they give Greta a seatbelt? She's in a special crate, I assure her. She's probably asleep by now. Sophie considers this. Does she ever dream? Sure, Arabelle, you've seen her running in her sleep. I had a dream last night, Sophie tells me. Grandpa was taking me for ice cream, but no matter what you asked for, you got strawberry. He hates strawberry, I say quietly. But in my dream, Sophie says he ate it anyway. She twists in her seat to face me. Will Grandpa be on the other side? She means in Arizona, but that isn't how I hear it. I'd always thought of my father and me as a unit, a team, but now I'm not sure. On the one hand, I was his child, and he must have been doing what he felt he needed to do. On the other hand, I'm a mother now, and he committed my worst nightmare. Sophie snuggles against me, twining her fingers in my hair. She used to sleep with it the way some babies sleep with a blanket or a teddy bear. Every time she'd lay down for a nap, I'd have to go with her. Eric thought it was a habit we should break. How else would she ever be able to sleep without me? I had asked him, why should she ever have to? The fasten seatbelt sign dings, and I help Sophie into her seat and tighten the band around her waist. The plane pushes off from the jetway and rolls backward, heading onto the tarmac for takeoff. When the plane begins to accelerate and the nose rises like a rocket, Sophie turns to me. Are we flying? My father and I used to have picnics at the airfield in Lebanon and watch the Cessnas and Pipers take off and land. We'd lie on our backs with the grass tickling our shoulders as the little planes vanished into colossal clouds, then reappeared like magic. When I asked him what kept the plane from falling out of the sky, he made me sit up and blow across the top of a paper napkin to see it rise like a flag in the wind. When the air moves faster on the top of the wings than the bottom, he told me the plane lifts. So I'm ready when Sophie asks me this question. It's all about pressure. When it comes at you from all sides equally, nothing moves. But if one side exerts more than the other, you just might find yourself in flight. I wonder if she has dimples like me, if she can bend her thumbs all the way backward, double-jointed like Sophie and I can, if she gave me my black hair or my fear of insects, if her labor was anything like mine. I have spent so long sculpting her in my imagination, a combination of Marion Cunningham and Carol Brady and Ma Walton and Mrs. Cosby. She will cry when she sees me and hold me so tight that I can't breathe. And even then, I will notice how seamlessly my body fits against hers. She will not be able to find words big enough to tell me how much she loves me. But there's another voice in my head, one that knows things are different if my mother has in fact been alive all this time. Why didn't she try harder to find me? All I ever really wanted in a mother is someone who could not be dragged from me kicking and screaming, no matter how powerful the force of separation was. Someone who would give up her life if it meant I couldn't be a part of it. Someone my father has always been. When I fall asleep during the flight, I dream. He has just finished planting a lemon tree in my backyard. I want to make lemonade, but there isn't any fruit on the tree yet. It looks naked under that electric sky, all angles and switchbacks, skinny arms shivering. His hands pat the dirt down at the bottom of the tree. He turns to me, but the sun is in my eyes, and I smile back without really seeing. In my lap is a striped cat. I feel for the missing stub of its tail, and it bolts out of my clutches between two barrel cacti that remind me of munchkins from The Wizard of Oz. What do you think, Beth? He asks. The dust stains his palms red, and when he wipes them on his jeans, there are two upside-down 5 fingerprints that become low-necked dinosaurs with their heads reaching toward each other. I think I want a dinosaur. I want a seal, too, to keep in the bathtub. I tell him this and he laughs. I know what you want, gorilla, he says. And then he swings me into his arms, and so high that the sun kisses blisters onto the soles of my feet. Isn't the usual style of writing of Jodi Picoult in this book unusual? Anyway, arriving at Sky Harbor Airport is, I imagine, like landing on Mars, jagged mountains and blood-red soil as far as I can see. I step out of the double glass doors and walk into a solid wall of heat. I wonder how a place like this and a place like New Hampshire could possibly be part of the same country. There's already a message on my cell phone from Eric, an address, actually. The lawyer sponsoring him to try a case in the state is an old classmate from law school, and someone, his secretary's cousin's friend, or something equally as complicated, has agreed to let us stay in her house while she moves in with her boyfriend. I collect a skittish Greta from the oversized baggage area, rent an SUV. Parentheses, how long do you need it? The clerk had asked, and I had stared at the woman blankly. And pile our luggage into the back seat and trunk around the colossal dog cage. Going through the motions only reminds me of the 1,000 things I don't know. What the grocery store chains are out here, how to get to this house on Los Brazos Street, and when I'll see my father again. Sophie's backpack slips to her elbows. Her hand rides on the top pull of Greta's leash. She follows me, bouncing on the balls of her feet, trusting me to know where we're going. Don't all children? Didn't I? We follow the Avis representative's directions, passing more stores and shopping malls than there are in all of New Hampshire. There seems to be a supplier for everything you might ever want or need. Sushi, motorized scooters, bronze sculpture, paint your own ceramic ware. I feel absolutely lost out here, and that actually is a relief. In Arizona, I'm not supposed to know anything. This is all naturally foreign. Unlike Wexton, here I have the right to wake up in the morning and not remember who or where I am. The address Eric has given me is in Mesa and must be a mistake. The only residences on Los Brazos are in a trailer park, not one filled with tidy rows of compact, immaculate homes with little gardens and window boxes, but something that resembles an enormous junk heap. There is a dusty parking lot encapsulating 50 motorhomes, none numbered, all in various states of disrepair. Sophie kicks at the back of my seat. Mommy, she asks, do we get to live in a bus? We drive past an old woman standing at the entrance of a trailer park, wrapped tight in a long raincoat in spite of the heat. Inside the fence, there doesn't seem to be a single living soul. I imagine how hot it must be to live inside a metal trailer when the outdoor temperatures alone break 100 degrees. We'll stay in a hotel, I decide. Then I remember that we don't have enough money for that. Eric said that this might not be a matter of weeks, but months. Some of the trailers have cacti planted next to their steps. Some have bronze garden ornaments stuck in the stones along their foundations. A young woman steps out of her door, and I immediately roll down my window. Excuse me, I call out. I'm trying to find... I look down at the number Eric left in his message. No hablo inglés. She hurries back inside her trailer and pulls shut all the curtains so we cannot peek inside. I would drive to Eric, but he hasn't told me where he is. Before I know it, I've made a full circle through the motorhome community, and I'm back on the driveway that leads out to the main road. The old woman is still standing there, and she smiles at me. She has the lime maple skin and moon face of a Native American. Her short white hair is twisted into a red scarf on top of her head. Every one of her fingers is decorated with a silver ring, something I notice when she flashes us by pulling aside the lapels of her coat. Underneath, she's wearing a t-shirt that says, "Don't worry, be Hopi." And various items are anchored to plastic loops sewn into the satin lining of the jacket. Rusted silverware, old 45s, and about 10 Barbie dolls. Garage sale today, she says, extra cheap. Sophie's face lights up when she sees the dolls. Mommy! Not today, I say, and I smile tightly at the woman. Sorry. She shrugs and closes her coat. I hesitate. Do you, by any chance, know which trailer is number 35677? It's right over there. Pointing, she indicates a decrepit building less than 20 feet away. Nobody lives in it, though. Girl moved out a week ago. The neighbor's got the key. The neighbor's trailer has all kinds of rainbow wind catchers suspended from the overhang of the doorway. A stool with a mosaic seat and plaster sculpted human legs and feet supports a twisted cactus whose shoots look like the tango map of the New York subway. Hundreds of brown feathers are tied with string and leather to the green branches of a Palo Verde tree in the front yard. Palo Verde? Thanks, I say, and telling Sophie to wait in the car. I leave the air conditioning running and walk up to the door. I ring the bell twice, but there's no answer. They're not home, the old woman says, as if I haven't figured this out for myself. But before I can reply, I hear the approaching whine of a police siren. Immediately, I'm back in Wexton 10 seconds before my entire life fell apart. I run for the car, for Sophie. The police cruiser pulls in behind my rental, but when the officer gets out, he walks away from me and toward the old woman. Now, Ruth Ann, he says, how many times do I have to tell you? She tightens the belt of her trench coat. Halixai. I don't know, it's H-A-L-I with like an accent. K-S-A''I. I guess it's a Hopi word. You can't tell me what I can't do. This property isn't zone commercial, the policeman says. I don't see anyone selling anything. He flips up his sunglasses. What's under your coat? She turns to me. That's sexual harassment, don't you think? The officer seems to notice me for the first time. Who are you, a customer? No, I'm just moving in. Here? I think so, I explained. I was looking for my key. The policeman pinches the bridge of his nose. Ruthie, get yourself a table at one of those Indian flea markets, okay? Don't make me come back here. He gets back into his car and zooms down the block again. The old woman sighs and trudges up to the front door that I've been knocking on. Hold your horses, she says. I'll get your key. You live here? She doesn't answer, just unlocks the door and walks in. Even from this distance, the house smells like sugar burning. Well, she calls after a minute, come on. I get Sophie and Greta out of my car and tell the dog to wait on the stoop. As Sophie and I step inside, Ruth Ann takes off her trench coat and spreads it over the back of a futon, the heads of the Barbies inside poking out like gophers. Nearly everywhere I look, there is some box of junk or a tin of beads and feathers. Glue guns lay like discarded murder weapons on the floor. I know it's here somewhere, she says, rummaging in a drawer full of twigs and pencils. Behind me, Sophie slides one of the dolls out of its resting place in the coat. Mommy, look, she whispers. This Barbie doll has a miniature pint of ice cream in one arm and a Sleepless in Seattle video in the other. She wears sweatpants, fuzzy slippers, and has a gun strapped to her hip. A tag around her neck reads PMS Barbie. It makes me laugh out loud. I reach into the trench coat and pull out another doll, reality TV Barbie. She is wearing a jog bra and wedding veil and is holding a map of the Amazon. She has a half-eaten sheep's eye in her mouth, a fistful of dollars in her back pocket, and a Nike contract tucked into her athletic sock. These are very funny, I say. I call them black market Barbies, dolls for girls who don't want to stop playing yet. The old woman crosses the room and holds out her hand. I'm Ruth Ann Masawistiwa, owner and CEO of Second Wind, specializing in possession reincarnation. Oh, what's that? Finding homes for what other folks don't want. I'm one big portable Indian pawn shop, she shrugs. Your old toaster might be someone else's inbox at work. Your cowboy boot could have a whole next life as a planter for geraniums. What about the dolls? Another rebirth, she says proudly. I make them down to every last accessory, even the Prozac prescription bottle for midlife crisis Barbie. I wanted to carve Katsina dolls, but only Hopi men can do that. Women are supposed to carve with their wombs, if you get my drift. Then again, I don't like being told what not to do. I shake my head trying to follow this conversation. Katsina? They're spirits to the Hopi. There are hundreds of different ones. Male, female, plants, animals, insects, you name it. They used to visit in person, but now they come as clouds or up through the earth for ceremonies that bring rain and snow to the crops and blessings. Katsina dolls are carved out of cottonwood to give to children at these dances so they can learn the religion, but nowadays they're also a hot ticket item for collectors. Ruth Ann picks up one of her Barbies. Don't know if this will have the same staying power, but I'm trying. She reaches onto a shelf and pulls down a Kelly doll, Barbie's little sister, which she offers to Sophie. Bet you'd like this, she says. Sophie immediately sits down on the floor and begins to pull off Kelly's elastic clothes. I have a Kelly at home. And where's that? Next door, I interrupt. I'm not ready to tell this woman her story yet. I don't know that I'll ever be ready. Ruth Ann squats down beside Sophie and pretends to pull out of her ear a long red shoelace. It reminds me so much of my father doing his magic tricks at the senior center that tears line the column of my throat. Well, Ruth Ann says, will you look at that? At the end of the shoelace is a key. Roseanne cups her hands around Sophie's tiny face. You come play with my dolls whenever you want, Siwa. Siwa. Then she gets to her feet slowly and presses the key into my palm. Don't lose it, she warns. I nod. I think of all the ways I might interpret those words. It takes two people to make a lie work, the person who tells it and the one who believes it. The first lie my father must have told was to me that my mother had died in a car crash. But why didn't I ask when I was old enough to visit her grave? Why didn't I question the fact that I had no maternal grandparents or uncles or cousins who ever visited? Why didn't I ever look for my mother's jewelry, her old clothes, her high school yearbook? There were times when Eric was drinking that he'd come home, too careful in his movements to not be intoxicated. But instead of calling him on his bad judgment, I'd pretend everything was fine, just like he was doing. You can invent any fiction and call it a life. I thought that if I did it often enough, I might start to believe it. Sometimes when you don't ask questions, it's not because you're afraid that someone will lie to your face. It's because you're afraid they'll tell you the truth. There are bonuses to this trailer. You can walk the entire length of it 4 times in a single breath. You can stand in the kitchen and see into the bedroom. The kitchen table cleverly converts into an extra bed. To Sophie's delight, the entire interior is painted Pepto-Bismol pink down to the toilet seat. There's a phone book. There are 27 listings for Matthews in the greater Phoenix region. 34 live in Scottsdale. Just as the operator told me, there's no Elise Matthews, no E. Matthews, nothing that I could trace to my mother. It is entirely possible that she's become a different person too. The previous occupant, in a fit of mercy, has left behind an oscillating fan. I set it up in the bedroom, pointing directly at Sophie and Greta, who have curled up on top of the double mattress. Then I step outside and sit on the stoop. It's still blistering hot, although the sun has nearly set. The sky seems wider here, stretched like cellophane, and the stars are starting to come out. I'm convinced they are a puzzle. If I stare at them hard enough, they'll move of their own accord. They will link their sharp arms and spell out all the answers. We say it all the time, how we'd give up anything for someone we love, but I wonder, when push comes to shove, who'd truly step up to the line? Would Eric jump in front of a bullet to save me? Would I do it for Eric? What if it meant I'd die or be paralyzed forever? What if it meant that I could never go back after my existence would be divided from that point on into before and after? The only person I can honestly say I'd save without a second thought is Sophie, simply because in the accounting scheme of my heart, her life means more than mine. Had my father felt that way too? I'd take out my cell phone and dial Fitz, but his voicemail picks up. I dial Eric and he answers. Where are you, I ask. Looking at the most amazing view, Eric says, as an unfamiliar car pulls in front of me. Eric leans out the window, still holding the phone to his ear. Want to hang up now, he asks, and he smiles. He gets out of the car and I fall into his arms, the first place all day that feels familiar. How's Sophie, asks. Sleeping already. I follow him as he starts into the trailer to find her. Did you see him? Eric doesn't have to ask who I'm talking about. I tried, but the Madison Street jail won't let me in without a bar card. What's that? A little piece of paper that doesn't exist in New Hampshire, which says I'm in good standing with the State Bar Association. Eric stops dead in the entryway, staring at the pink couch and the cotton candy wallpaper. Jesus Christ, we're living inside a hubba bubba bubble. I was thinking more like the Barbie Winnebago. I say, what about me? What about you? Would they let me in to see him? On Eric's face, I see a play of responses. His reluctance to let go of me now that we're both here. His fear of what I might find. His understanding that I need my father right now more than I need him. Yes, he says, I think they would. I don't know why it's called getting lost. Even when you turn down the wrong street. When you find yourself at the dead end of a chain-link fence or a road that turns to sand, you are somewhere. It just isn't where you expect it to be. Twice I passed exits on the highway for downtown Phoenix and have to turn around. 3 times I stop at a gas station to ask for directions. How hard can it be to find a jail? When I finally arrive, I'm surprised by how ordinary it is on the inside. The serviceable tile and banks of plastic chairs. This could be any state agency. I wonder if there are visiting hours I should have called for in advance. But there are other people in the lobby area. Lanky black boys wearing baggy pants, native women with tears still drying on their cheeks, an old man in a wheelchair with a toddler riding on his lap. I follow the lead of everyone else, taking a form from a stack on a table. They are simple questions, or would be for anyone not in my situation. Name, address, date of birth, relationship to the inmate, inmate's name. I take a pen out of my pocket and start to fill it out. Delia Hopkins, I write, and on second thought cross it out. Bethany Matthews. After I finish, I stand in line trying to pretend it is any other familiar line. Line at the grocery store, line of parents waiting in their cars to pick up children after school, the wait to sit on the lap of a mall Santa Claus. When it is my turn, the officer looks at me. First time? I nod. Is it that obvious? I need your ID too. He does a double take of my New Hampshire license, but enters the information into his computer. Well, he says after a moment of watching the screen, you're clear. Of what? Outstanding warrants for arrest. He hands me a visitation pass. You want to head to that door on the left. I am told to pick any free locker behind me and put all my personal belongings inside. Then comes a metal detector and an elevator ride, and when the doors open, I realize where they've been hiding this jail. It is large and gray, intimidating. There are echoes, steel striking steel, a man screaming, an intercom. An inmate holding a washcloth up to his eye walks by in the company of 2 officers who step into the elevator we vacate. More officers sit inside a glass booth monitoring our progress as we are led into the visiting room. Inside are 4 booths, each divided by a line of reinforced glass, a telephone intercom on each side. Round metal stools are bolted to the floor, evenly spaced like the spruces at a Christmas tree farm. There are other people waiting here too. A woman in a burqa, a teenager with an angry scar across his cheek, and a Hispanic man whispering a rosary. My father is the last prisoner to be brought in. He is wearing striped scrubs just like you'd see in a cartoon, and for the first time this becomes real to me. He is not going to step forward and pull off the costume, tell me this has all been a bad dream. It is really happening. It is now my life. My hand comes up to my mouth, and I know he can't hear me drawing my breath like I'm drowning. But he touches the glass between us all the same, as if it might still be that simple to reach me. He picks up the phone and mimes for me to do the same. Delia, he says, his voice hammered then. Delia, baby, I'm sorry. I've told myself that I won't cry, but before I know it, I'm doubled over on the tiny stool, sobbing so hard that my chest hurts. I want him to reach through the glass like the magician I used to think he was, and tell me this is all just a misunderstanding. I want to believe whatever it is he has to say. Don't cry, he begs. I wipe my eyes. Why didn't you tell me? You were too little at first, and then when you were older, I was too selfish. He hesitates. You used to look at me like I was a hero, and I didn't think I could stand it if you stopped looking at me like that. I lean closer to the wall between us. Then tell me now. I insist, tell me the truth. Suddenly I remember being very small and dumping all the pairs of tights I owned on my father's bed, a twisted ball of cabled blue and white snakes. I hate wearing these, I said to him. They always wind up bunched at my knees and make it so that at recess I can't run. I thought he would protest and tell me that I'd wear whatever was in my drawers, and that was that. But instead we started to laugh. You can't run? Well, we can't have that, can we? We named you Bethany. You were so small when you were born, tinier even than a loaf of bread. I used the filing cabinet as a crib for you when I took you to work with me. He looks up at me. I used to be a pharmacist. A pharmacist? I scramble back over my memory, trying to find red flags I missed the first time around. My father's quick knowledge of the dosage of baby Tylenol for Sophie's weight. His frustration when I couldn't understand high school chemistry. Why didn't he practice in New Hampshire, I wonder? And then I answer my own question. Because he was licensed under another name, someone who disappeared off the face of the earth. If you call yourself something different, does it change the person you are inside? Who were you? Charles, he says. Charles Edward Matthews. 3 first names. He startles. It's exactly what your mother said when we met. I draw in my breath when he mentions her. What was her real name? Elise, I didn't lie to you about that. No, I say, except instead of telling me you got divorced, you said she was dead. Let me tell you what happens when you cook down the syrup of loss over the open fire of sorrow. It solidifies into something else. Not grief like you'd expect or even regret. No, it gets thick as paste, black as ash. Yet it isn't until you dip a finger in and feel that sharp taste dissolving on your tongue that you realize this is anger in its purest form, unrefined, a substance to be weighed and measured and spread. I had to come here, or so I thought, to make sure my father was all right, to show him that I was all right too. I had come here to tell him that in spite of what the police had to say, in spite of what happened in court, I was not going to forget the childhood he'd given me. But suddenly the scales don't balance, and those 28 years I thought I knew are outweighed by the 4 I never had the chance to. Why? I ask, the word clenched between my teeth. Why did you do it? My father shakes his head. I didn't want you to get hurt, not then, Delia, and not now. Don't call me that! I'm so loud that in the booth beside us, a woman turns around. I didn't have a choice. My heart is pounding and I cannot stop. You had a choice. You had 1,000 choices. To leave or not to leave, to take me with you or not. Tell me the truth, when I was 5 years old or 10 or 20, I was the one without the choice, Dad. I hurry out of the visiting room so that he can feel what it's like to be the one left behind. By the time I get back to the pink trailer, everyone's asleep. Sophie is on the couch, curled like a question mark around Greta, who opens one eye and thumps her tail at the sight of me. I kneel down and touch Sophie's brow. She's sweating. A month after she was born, I bundled her up in her winter snowsuit in preparation for a trip to the grocery store and buckled her into the infant carrier that snaps into a car seat. I left the carrier on top of the kitchen table while I put on my own coat and boots. I was halfway to the grocery store, driving on the highway, when my cell phone rang. It was my father calling. Missing something? He asked. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, I realized that I'd never taken Sophie in her infant carrier out to the car. I'd left her on the kitchen table, strapped into the little half-moon seat. I couldn't believe I left behind my own infant. I couldn't believe I hadn't felt off balance, as if I were missing an arm or a leg, since she was just as critical a part of me. Mortified, I told my father I'd come straight home. Just go to the store, he'd said, laughing. She's safe with me. Broad hands slide under the front of my t-shirt, and I twist around to find Eric still warm with sleep. He pulls me into the bedroom at the end of the trailer and closes the door. Did you see him? He whispers. I nod. So? I had to talk to him through a glass booth, and he's wearing black and white stripes like some kind of criminal, Eric says softly, and that's all it takes for me to start to cry again. He wraps his arms around me, lowering me onto the bed. He's in there because of me, I say, and I don't even really know who that is anymore. Eric's body moves behind mine, one leg sliding warm between my own. He settles over me like fog, tracing the seam of me with his tongue. I do, he says. In my dream, I've been hiding. The kitchen floor glitters. It is covered with diamonds that I know are broken glass. There are shattered plates on the floor. The cabinets are open wide with no mugs or dishes left inside. There's yelling, almost as loud as the sound of glass breaking. I can hear it even after my hands are pressed tight over my ears. It sounds like the inside of a drum, like the dragging that's really my breathing, like the hard knot of tears in my throat that keeps me from swallowing. I am aware first of the sun rising underneath the covers. Then comes the breath, heavy and wet as sand at the bottom of the sea. I sit up in an instant and throw back the sheet to find Sophie huddled in a small knot, raging with a fever. I call for Eric, but he's gone. He's left me a note with the number of his friend's law offices. I can nearly hear my daughter's blood boiling. I ransack my luggage for a thermometer or aspirin or anything that might help. But when I come up empty-handed, I carry her into the pink bathroom and stand in the tepid shower with her in my arms. Sophie rolls her flushed face toward me, her eyes blind and blue. "There's a monster in the potty," she says. I glance into the toilet, where a small dark feather is floating. I flush it twice. "There," I say, "gone." But by now, Sophie's head lolls back. She is out cold. In the bathroom, there are no towels. I wrap Sophie in the shirt Eric discarded when he came home yesterday. Her teeth are chattering, her forehead blazes. She whimpers as I try to swaddle her tightly and then hurry out the front door. It's only 8 in the morning, but I kick at Ruth Ann Masawistiwa's door, still holding Sophie in my arms. "Please," I beg when she opens it, "I need to find a hospital." She takes one look at Sophie. "Follow me," she says. But instead of heading for my car, she walks into our trailer. She leans out the window that I opened last night for the fresh air, the one just over the couch where Sophie was sleeping. Ruth Ann's knotty hands run along the seam of the sash, searching the outside edge. "Got it," she says, and she plucks from the windowsill a brown feather that looks like the one I flushed down the toilet. Ruth Ann holds the feather outside. When she lets go, it winnows up in a draft of wind and is carried away. "Pajos," she says, and then she points to the Palo Verde bush in her front yard, a few feet away from the open window, where hundreds of feathers are still tied to the branches. They're prayer feathers. I make them to hold all the bad from last year. They're supposed to blow away in the winter and the evil with them. I hang them up in the tree so that no one gets poisoned by coming close. But I guess one made its way to your little girl. I blink at her, incredulous. "You expect me to believe my daughter's sick because of a chicken feather?" "It's a turkey feather," Ruth Ann says, "and why would I expect you to believe anything?" She puts the flat of her hand against Sophie's forehead. Then she gestures for me to do the same. Sophie's skin is cool to the touch. The fire in her cheeks has faded. She is sleeping evenly, one hand unfurled on my chest like a victory flag. I swallow hard, place her gently on the bed. "I'm still taking her to the doctor." "Of course you are," Ruth Ann says. "You think you know the world you're living in. If you can feel it and touch it and smell it and taste it, then it must be so. You tell yourself that you would bet your life on the simple fact that the sky is blue, and then one day someone comes along and informs you emphatically that you're wrong. Blue, you insist, blue as the ocean, blue as a whale, blue as my daughter's eyes. But that person shakes his head and everyone else backs him up. You poor girl, they say. All of those things, the ocean, the whale, her eyes, they're green. You've gotten them mixed up. You've had it wrong all along." 2 pediatricians, a neurologist, and 3 blood vials later, Sophie is pronounced healthier than a Mustang, whatever that means. One of the doctors, a woman with her hair pulled back so tight in a bun that it draws her eyes out at the edges, sits me down out of Sophie's range of hearing. "Has there been any trouble at home?" she asks. Kids this age sometimes do things for attention. But this was no sore throat or stomach ache. You cannot fake the kind of sick that comes from so deep inside. "Sophie's not like that," I explain, affronted. "I think I know my own daughter." The doctor shrugs as if she has heard all this before. I drive toward our house gingerly, reversing Ruth Ann's directions. In the back seat, Sophie plays with the stickers the nurse has given her. The whole way I second-guess myself. Is this the correct turn? Can I make a right on red? Did I imagine this morning's episode? Maybe faulty judgment is contagious. I realize as I pull into the trailer park that I'm just about the same age as my father was when he took me away. I let Greta out for a while and then take Sophie next door to Ruth Ann's. The old woman opens the door, picking at her cuticles, which are covered with claws of dried glue. "Siwa," she says to Sophie, "you look much better." Sophie vines herself around my left leg. "And Shire," S-H-Y-E-R, Ruth Ann, Shire. Ruth Ann adds. She frowns at Sophie's face. "Open up," she says, tapping her on the chin. And when Sophie does, Ruth Ann plucks a tiny pair of pink plastic sandals off her tongue, followed by strappy yellow heels, and finally a set of spa slippers. "No wonder you are feeling sick," she says, as Sophie's eyes go wide. "Choking on all these old souls. Go on inside and see if you can find out which Barbies these belong to." When Sophie is gone, I look at Ruth Ann. "You know, I don't believe in magic." "Me neither," she admits. "You never do, when you know how to do the tricks." I follow her into the trailer. "What about this morning, then?" She shrugs. "A lucky guess. About 5 years back, there was a Pahana, a white lady photographer, staying up near Shangopavi, and she got miserable stomach cramps all of a sudden. Indian Health Service docs couldn't figure it out, said there was nothing wrong with her. Turns out she'd taken some pahos that were lying around and tucked them in the brim of her straw hat. As soon as she brought the feathers back to where she'd found them, all the belly pain went away." I look over my shoulder to the nearby tree where the other feathers still wait for the breeze. It could happen again. Ruth Ann glances up at the tree. "Tomorrow the wind will blow a different way. Sooner or later they'll all disappear anyway." I watch a light gust stir the feathers. "Then what?" "Then we do what we do best," Ruth Ann says. "Start over from scratch."